You're listening to the Stories of Subi podcast, which has been produced for the Subi East project. The Stories of Subi are brought to you by DevelopmentWA in collaboration with Creating Communities Australia. The Subi East area has a rich history, and we're bringing you conversations with the people who can provide interesting perspectives on the great memories, history, and changes they've seen. Sallie Davies is an active member of Perth Modern School's History Centre, and she has good reason to be. She taught there, attended school there, and her father went there before her. She sits with Robyn White, Perth Mod's former principal, to discuss the history of the school. Tell me about being a student at Perth Mod.
I enjoyed every minute of my student days. It was a place of safety for me. I lost my father when I was 16, and the friends I made were very important. And my father attended Mod too.
Yeah, your father attended about 1914.
Something like that, yes.
Did he tell you much about his experience?
No, he didn't talk much about it. And I think he might have been a naughty boy at times. But he went on to become a very community-oriented man.
After leaving Perth Mod as a student, what brought you back to teach?
I always wanted to be a teacher. Some of the staff at Mod encouraged me to go into home economics. We went on to teach out in the schools.
And did you choose to go back to Mod as a teacher? Or did you just get placed there?
I believe that it was an unspoken policy of the headmaster at the time that he encouraged former students to become.
Can you talk a bit about how it started in those early days?
One of the big dilemmas they had once the government decided that they were going to build a government high school in Perth was, what do we call it? We can't call it Perth High School because Bishop Hale was using that name. So Cecil Andrews pushed the initiative and he said to the minister, I think we should call it Perth Modern School because it was modelled on the nature of what was known as modern schools in England. What they needed in Perth were students who could go on to those tertiary educations, particularly for teachers.
Previously, the education offered for students who were moving into tertiary education of any sort was a classic education with maths and languages and literature. So most schools did primary school to standard 6, grade 7. Sometimes they would stay for one more year, maybe even 2, and that was a primary school tops. And then they left into nursing or whatever else. Education was for the classes, so you knew where you stood. Secondary education was only for those who were going into leadership, politics and leading industry. So to offer a government secondary school in itself was a whole new world. So science was a very second-rate subject area.
They created an agricultural block. Girls went to Mod to learn home management science and boys went to Mod ostensibly to learn agricultural science.
Yes.
If they were going in the science stream. And that was the statement the minister made in opening the school.
The rifle range, what was that? How did that come to be?
The rifle range was set up once we had cadets.
The boys used to take their rifles home on the bus. They'd walk out of cadet training with their rifles over their shoulders and
probably not with
get
ammunition.
On the bus.
That was probably under lock and key. But if you had army cadets, you practiced pulling a rifle apart, putting it back together, marching, as cadets. So a lot of the Mod kids became Air Force pilots in World War II.
Most of the RAAF guys who went overseas went and trained, I think, in Canada, the Royal Air Force. We lost a lot of our boys in those battles over London. And Nerida Dilworth, who was one of the leading doctors at Princess Margaret Hospital, also went to Mod. She talks about the trenches too. We certainly had trenches dug in the grounds, and we had practices to go down these trenches. We all remembered because they were cut beside the pine trees and the roots dripped rosin all over us. And you knew it would get on the uniform, so we didn't relish these drills. They read out the names of boys who'd been killed.
Every
assembly.
Every magazine.
They had 3 of our first 4 head boys were killed. A number of Mod students were evacuated to the country during World War II. One student who came to Mod in 1943 said he first attended modern school when he was at Perth Boys, and they'd closed the school because that was inner city.
When I was principal, we had a lot of PMH students at school, so they were enrolled at Perth Mod. When students were outpatients but couldn't go back to the country, or inpatients but very mobile and needing secondary additional education, they'd come over to Mod for science and for either a part or a whole program.
Nerida Dilworth talks about the garden.
Yes,
the veggie garden that in 1942 was planted. There were students went over to work in it, and the veggies were used to supplement the food used in the hospital because money was short.
Certainly in modern days, kids have gone over and done performances for students for children that are at the hospital.
Can you talk to me about Perth Mod going from selective, comprehensive?
Some people suggest there was a political concern. The principal at Perth Mod at that time was also head of the union, was a very capable man, but he did take a trip to Russia when it wasn't the done thing. So maybe the politics came into it. Maybe there were other principals that wanted to be principals of a senior secondary school rather than a junior secondary school. So competing interests, but there was a political decision decided at that stage that every secondary school in WA would be community-based, a local school, co-educational, boys and girls, and comprehensive. So we used to get kids from all over the place sent to us by school psychs. This child's not coping in this environment, can you take them? And the kids all accepted it. They were very good at accepting and looking after each other.
During the 40s, of the fact that girls weren't doing the professional sciences, weren't able to do the professional science courses that they needed. And many of them were becoming doctors. This was a huge issue, so much so that by 1947 they had allowed their first group of girls to do chemistry.
Perth Modern has changed the face of both WA and Australia because so many strong, equitable leaders have come out of the school and that educational process, however good the teaching or the curriculum was at different times. We had one chap who was the parent of a girl who went through the music program. He came back for years afterwards and made morning tea on Saturday mornings for the kids, but he also cleaned around the local garden bits and things around the whole of Subiaco. But he was totally committed to the school because it was the centre of Subiaco for him. And it was because of the history and, that the old building and the community that goes to Mod has always been a very special group of people.
Thanks for listening to the Stories of Subi podcast. It was created by Creating Communities Australia for Development WA.